Stone Cold Prose, building better words.
The other night, I watched Glengarry Glen Ross, the classic James Foley directed film adapted from David Mamet's play of the same name. Later that night, I scribbled the following lines in my journal. What is the playwright's obsession with salesmen anyway? I guess the question answers itself. Salesmen are a sort of effigy of America, amoral hustlers selling worthless crap to credulous fools. Now, painting with a broad brush like that is dangerous, and it's only logical if we follow up with much finer brushwork. So let me expand on my remarks because the playwright's obsession is important, and because my oversimplification of salesmen, which is insulting as well as ridiculously generalized, does possess at its core a few coarse grains of truth about the very nature of the society in which we live. Hi guys, welcome back to Stone Cold Prose, where we build better words, better thoughts, and better men. I'm Miles Watson, novelist and author of numerous award-winning series including Cage Life, Sinner's Cross, and The Chronicles of Magnus, which was recently an Amazon bestseller. I worked in Hollywood for 12 years, criminal justice for another 10, that's an in-joke, and now I break it all down and build it back better. So let's get into this. In 1949, Arthur Miller wrote Death of a Salesman, a play which by acclamation is considered one of the best of the 20th century. Salesman is a two-act tragedy described by one critic as the story of an aging, defeated, traveling salesman moving inexorably towards self-destruction, clinging desperately to fantasies. Many see the play as an implicit criticism of the American dream, in particular the idea that salesman Willy Loman disintegrates when he realizes he has failed to heed what Miller called society's thundering command to succeed. Loman is emotionally and intellectually shallow, and he measures himself by external rather than internal standards. He is more concerned with the appearance that he is a good father and a salesman than the actuality of these things. Even his modest prime as a salesman, which has already passed him by when the play opens, was based on the idea of ingratiation with important people rather than business acumen or personal integrity. As he ages, his ability to get by on this ability contracts, placing increasing financial and emotional stress on him and on the narrative he has created to appear more successful than he actually is. When Loman's complex delusional projection scheme can no longer evade reality, it bursts like a bubble floating into a nail, and he himself. One critic attacked Salesman for its Marxist tone, and indeed the play can be viewed as an attack on the emotional, intellectual, and spiritual effect of the get on or get out mentality, which exploded in America and elsewhere after World War I, and insisted that the measure of a man was his ability to succeed in business, i.e. to make money and purchase expensive objects. Any attack, implicit or indirect, on capitalism is always viewed as Marxist by those of right-leaning persuasion, in the same way that any criticism of one's own country inevitably triggers rage in nationalists. It's an instinctive response, and is often irrelevant even when entirely true. If I may presume to enter Miller's mind, I believe his motive was actually quite personal. Willy Loman is largely based on Miller's own uncle, Manny Newman, a salesman who believed himself in competition both with Miller's father, financially, and in terms of fatherhood, and who ultimately, though I'm not aware Miller ever said so publicly, he pointedly noted in his own success as a playwright that that was not a source of joy to his uncle. In Manny's mind, his own shortcomings as a father were probably exposed by it, and viewed in macroscopic terms, Salesman is about the tragedy of possessing the wrong dreams, the wrong standards, the wrong systems of self-measurement. In short, the wrong value system like Manny Newman had. And I think it inarguable, though many will die in a ditch arguing against it, that the last 100 years of capitalism have elevated materialism and the competition over the appearance of success to a religion, albeit a false and hollow one. The golden calf of the 20th and 21st centuries is fake it till you make it, the projection of success as a presage to success itself. But what is success? The acquisition of money, wealth, fame, and influence. Not keeping up with the Joneses, but blasting past them at a speed in a blur of cash, jewels, martini olives, and carefully curated photos from your vacation to Bali. And in lieu of that, conjuring the illusion that you are more than you seem. The idea being that if enough people believe a lie, it becomes truth. a concept Willy Loman accepted as fact and which is also distinctly Orwellian in nature. Speaking of Orwell, in Keep the Aspidistra Flying, he paints a horribly vivid picture of Gordon Comstock, a Londoner who works for a red lead advertising firm. Comstock believes advertising the dirtiest ramp capitalism has yet invented, but another one of Orwell's characters, George Bowling from the novel Coming Up for Air, would probably disagree. This insurance salesman believes that all sales are a swindle, and the question is merely whether the cards are on the table or not, i.e. whether the buyer is aware they're being taken or not. In fact, if advertisers are the strategists of capitalism, the boys from S2 who fuddle with the maps and compasses and tide tables and lunar charts and the types of artillery shells to be employed in an attack, salesmen are the foot soldiers, the infantrymen, the guys who storm the beaches. Capitalism as an economic system could probably endure in some form or other without advertising, because people will ultimately seek out their needs, and in so doing encounter their wants. But it could not survive a single week without salesmen. And yet, and is so often the case in life, the most necessary component of a system often occupies the most thankless, most hazardous, most stress-inducing space. In war, infantrymen die in greater numbers than anyone else in the service. And in capitalism, for every salesman who ends up like Blake in Glengarry Glen Ross, there are a half dozen or a dozen or perhaps dozens who end up like Shelley the Machine Levine, which brings us back to Glengarry, or will in a moment, as I have one more place to tarry before we return there, and believe it or not, it's WKRP in Cincinnati. WKRP was a 70s era sitcom about a third-rate radio station in one of America's least glamorized cities. Among its more memorable characters was Herb Tarlek, the station sales manager, concocted by screenwriters as a kind of walking, talking cliche of unprofessional, bribe-taking, desperate salespeople. Tarlek is sleazy, underhanded, frequently but not consistently inept, and favors horribly tacky clothing, mostly polyester and white leather. His boss once laments, "I should have fired Herb Tarlek immediately. He's the worst salesman in the world." In the world. But Tarlek, as I pointed out, is not actually bad at sales. His failure is in ethics and to a certain degree morals. In Herb's mind, the ends justify the means or the means justify themselves. In either case, the goal is to sell airtime, and to whom it is sold hardly ever enters into his calculations. Now, I mentioned Tarlek specifically because his enduring popularity is reflective of the fact of how many Americans feel about salesmen, that they are liars, that they are untrustworthy, that they lack ethics. There is probably a note or several notes of hypocrisy in this view, especially in a country whose cultural identity revolves around buying and selling things. Nevertheless, it is widely held, and it is well to remember, that Tarlek, although a nemesis for his fellow characters on the series, is also a pitiable figure. He's lonely, insecure, and frequently desperate. It is not difficult to imagine him suffering the fate of a Willy Loman. So, Glengarry Glen Ross. Like Salesmen, it was adapted from a play. Unlike Salesmen, its most famous dialogue comes from the film rather than the stage version, in which an alpha real estate salesman, played by Alec Baldwin, viciously berates a group of salesmen. Check it out.
Put that coffee down. Coffee's for closers only. You think I'm fucking with you? I am not fucking with you. I'm here from downtown. I'm here from Mitch and Murray. And I'm here on a mission of mercy. Your name's Levine? Yeah. You call yourself a salesman, you son of a bitch? I don't gotta listen to this shit. You certainly don't, pal. Because the good news is you're fired. The bad news is you've got just 1 week to regain your job, starting with tonight. Starting with tonight's sit. Oh, have I got your attention now? Good. Because we're adding a little something to this month's sales contest. As you all know, first prize is a Cadillac Eldorado. Anybody want to see second prize? Second prize is a set of steak knives. Third prize is you're fired. You get the picture? You laughing now? You got leads. Mitch and Murray paid good money. Get their names to sell them. You can't close the leads you're given. You can't close shit. You are shit. Hit the bricks, pal, and beat it, because you are going out.
The leads are weak.
The leads are weak. Fucking leads are weak. You're weak. I've been in this business 15 years.
What's your name?
Fuck you. That's my name. You know why, mister? Because you drove a Hyundai to get here tonight. I drove an $80,000 BMW. That's my name. And your name is you're wanting. And you can't play in the man's game. You can't close them. Then go home and tell your wife your troubles. Because only one thing counts in this life. Get them to sign on the line which is dotted. You hear me, you fucking faggots? A, B, C. A always be B, C closing. Always be closing. Always be closing. AIDA. Attention, interest, decision, action. Attention. Do I have your attention? Interest. Are you interested? I know you are, because it's fuck or walk. You close or you hit the bricks. Decision. Have you made your decision for Christ? And action. AIDA. Get out there. You got the prospects coming in. You think they came in to get out of the rain? A guy don't walk on the lot lest he wants to buy. They're sitting out there waiting to give you their money. Are you going to take it? Are you man enough to take it? What's the problem, pal? You, boss.
You're such a hero. You're so rich. How come you're coming down here and wasting your time with such a bunch of bums?
You see this watch? You see this watch? Yeah. That watch costs more than your car. I made $970,000 last year. How much you make? You see, pal, that's who I am, and you're nothing. Nice guy? I don't give it.
Now this scene lays bare, in Mamet's mind at least, the driving principle of capitalism, i.e. of sales, which is simply to get them to sign on the line which is dotted. It doesn't matter what you're selling or whether it serves a purpose or whether the prospective buyer can afford it. It doesn't matter if the product is harmful to the buyer or to the environment. What matters is simply to sell, to close the deal, to take the commission check and move on, virus-like, to the next sit. Your entire value as a human being is determined by this ability. Blake, the embodiment of conscience-free capitalism, makes a special point of his disinterest in any other qualities. Indeed, the only successful salesman we see among the four downtrodden men who work for this branch of the firm is Ricky Roma, played by Al Pacino, whose wiki describes him as follows. The most successful salesman in the office, he is ruthless, dishonest, and immoral, and succeeds because he has a talent for figuring out a client's weaknesses and crafting a pitch that will exploit those weaknesses. He is a smooth talker and tends to maneuver clients towards a sale by means of grand but vaguely incoherent soliloquies. Kind of like me. Roma, incidentally, is not present when Blake excoriates the other salesmen of the branch, is much more likable than Blake, but almost indistinguishable in outlook. In the film, we see him slowly, patiently, and deliberately maneuver a drunken man into a purchase he cannot afford. Later, when the desperate man tries to recant the sale, Roma unveils another elaborate set of techniques for regaining emotional control over the hapless buyer. The way the scene is written is crucial because while we empathize with that hapless and desperate buyer, we also empathize with Roma. He has made a sale fairly and squarely in the sight of what Orwell called the money god, and has every right to use whatever means of persuasion he can conjure, including trickery and emotional manipulation, to retain that sale. In short, he is simply playing by the rules of the capitalist game, which boil down to caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. Now, Glengarry, the play, is described as, among other things, exploring themes of capitalism, masculinity, and morality. The connection between capitalism and masculinity, or rather the concept of masculinity, is one that has not been sufficiently explored in the public discourse, at least not by my way of thinking. While it finds its roots in obvious soil, which is hypergamy, i.e. that women choose men based on their social standing and wealth rather than looks or emotional attraction, it is an extension of that idea, in which men judge themselves and other men by their ability to project social standing. Blake feels justified in humiliating and insulting the other salesman because he, unlike they, possesses brass balls. Because he drives a fancy car and wears a sharp suit and owns an expensive watch, he is not only more successful but more manly than they are. He has brass balls. And indeed, when we consider Willy Loman, we must also consider that his ruin is dual in nature. First comes the actual failure of his life, then comes the failure of the delusions which serve as a narcotic to dull the pain of his real life failure. As a friend of mine, a lifelong salesman who never tires of pointing out that what a salesman is really selling is immaterial, because the actual commodity being discussed is himself, and every sale is a referendum on the salesman's skill to getting a prospective buyer to sign on the line which is dotted. In other words, a referendum on his worth as a human being and a man under our system of economics. Because a salesman who can't sell, by extension, not only lacks brass balls, he lacks any balls at all. In our societal hierarchy, he is the end product, which is unsellable. Economic systems shape moral values and behavior. They are not the sole arbiters of those things, but it is folly to suggest that they do not play a vital role in everyday life. A person growing up in a hydraulic despotism will have a different outlook on life and his place within it than someone growing up in a communist, statist, or socialist economy. All economic systems have their built-in contradictions and cruelties, and capitalism is no exception. On the one hand, it tends to produce both technological innovation and levels of material prosperity that are lacking in some other types of economic systems. On the other hand, and especially since the technique of assembly line mass production was initiated a century ago, it has created a beast which needs to be fed. The citizen is now referred to as a consumer. And this is not by accident. Under our system, citizenship is now less important than consumerism. And indeed, the role of a citizen has actually explicitly been defined by some in power as consumption. The consumption, or even the conspicuous consumption, of material goods, many of which are unnecessary and even harmful to the consumer in any number of ways. Modern capitalism, at least in the version that is practiced in much of the West, is debt-based and sells the concept of lifestyle, of material prosperity, to people who, generally speaking, cannot afford that lifestyle or those materials. The hire purchase system, also known as the never-never, which is what British people used to call buying things on installment, didn't appear until about 1890, and it didn't get widespread societal traction until the 1920s. Prior to then, it was almost impossible for people to live above their means, because credit had not yet replaced money as the principal means by which things were purchased. And this necessarily set limits on what people could physically acquire. The advent of installment plans and the widespread extension of credit to people with no collateral created a system in which the public demand for things was increased by many orders of magnitude. This, in turn, required more advertising and more salesmen than had ever before existed. The advent of internet commerce and the proliferation of cell phones meant a continuous blanketing of potential consumers who were once only exposed to radio, television, billboard, and print advertising. But the changes in technology did not change the creed of the salesman. His job remained unchanged from the days when guys peddled soap powder, encyclopedias, or vacuum cleaners door to door. It was, then as now, to get people to sign upon the line which is dotted. In the end, the salesman is a source of fascination because he is indeed an effigy for American values, American society, and the American dream itself. He represents two sides of a coin. On the one hand, the Blakes and Ricky Romas, who are successful because they are ruthless and admired because of their ruthlessness as much as their success. And on the other hand, Willie Lomans and Shelley Levines, who have lost or never quite possessed enough of an edge, who fail not only at their assigned task of selling the thing, whatever the thing may be, but in a larger societal sense because they have failed to sell themselves. And in so failing, surrendered not only their dignity, but their masculinity. In the successful salesman, we see the core values of our capitalist society: success for its own sake and material prosperity, especially material prosperity that can be flung in the faces of others. In the failed salesman, we see the sickly pathos of the man judged and found wanting in his chosen field, the man who accepted societal values that he cannot measure up to. Because, to paraphrase Willie Loman, the only thing you've got in this world is what you can sell. And when you can't sell yourself, well, you've got nothing. Coffee is for closers. Folks, if you enjoyed today's video, please remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and remember to check out my books. Link is probably not in the description. I drop scripted content every Friday at 3 p.m., shorts almost every day, and unscripted rants whenever rage moves me to do so. I will see you next time, and until then, stay cold and away from the coffee, because a loser's a loser.